Hi, I'm Rachel, and I want to take you back to a sunny Sunday that started like any other but turned into a day that changed everything for me. It was one of those days you don't expect to stand out but ends up staying with you forever. As I pulled up to my brother James's house, a wave of mixed emotions washed over me. I was excited to see everyone, but there was a bit of nervousness, too. It had been a while since the whole family gathered together, and I was looking forward to catching up. I had some exciting news to share, as well I had just landed a new job as a manager at a top marketing firm, something I had worked hard for. My car, an old 1998 black sedan, was loaded up with bags of chips and homemade salsa. Sure, it wasn't much to look at, especially next to the other cars in the driveway, but it was mine, and I had paid it off. It got me where I needed to go, and that's what mattered. As soon as I stepped out of the car, James was already there to greet me with a grin on his face. "Hey, Jules. We were starting to think you bailed on us," he joked. I laughed, handing over the snacks. Never. Traffic was awful, but I made it. We walked into the backyard, and the smell of burgers on the grill instantly hit me. I spotted Mary, James's wife, standing by the patio. She looked like she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine, dressed in a perfect summer dress and oversized designer sunglasses. She always knew how to turn heads, and today was no different. My parents were at the grill, waving as they flipped the burgers, while my younger siblings, Michael and Amy, were busy setting up some outdoor games. Everything seemed perfect, just the way family gatherings usually were. But of course, Mary had to make her entrance. Finally, the guest of honor arrives. Mary called out in her loud voice, the kind that made sure everyone, and I mean everyone, even the neighbors, could hear her. As she said this, her eyes darted toward my old blue car, parked next to their shiny new SUV. "Couldn't you park that relic around the block, Jules? It's ruining my view." Some of my cousins chuckled, and I tried to brush it off with a laugh. "Well, it gets me from point A to point B," I replied, trying not to let it get to me. But Mary wasn't finished. She sighed dramatically and took a long sip from her cocktail. "Oh, honey, you really should treat yourself to something nicer. You're a manager now, aren't you? You should act like it." I started to respond, wanting to share my exciting news about the new job, but before I could get a word out, Mary had already turned away. She was gathering a group of people for a game, completely dismissing me. I stood there for a moment, her words still stinging. It wasn't just about the car. It was the way she said it, like a reminder that no matter what I achieved, in her eyes, I'd never be enough. James caught my eye from across the yard and gave me an apologetic shrug, mouthing, "Don't let her get to you." I tried to smile back, but it was hard to shake off the feeling of being belittled. The afternoon went on like most barbecues do, games, mingling, and catching up with family. I tried to enjoy myself, but Mary's comment kept running through my mind. It wasn't the first time she had made me feel small, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. It wasn't really about the car. It was about the unspoken competition she seemed to always have with me, reminding me where I stood in her world. As we all sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily. Everyone was sharing updates about their lives, from new jobs to family news. When it was my turn, I shared the big news about my new job. The family congratulated me, and I got a few questions about the position. But even as the spotlight was on me for a moment, Mary managed to steal it back, talking about her own role at a similar company, making it seem like my achievement was nothing compared to hers. Little did she know, I had something even bigger in store, something that would change everything, but I wasn't going to let her ruin the moment just yet. As we all sat around the table, enjoying the meal, Mary leaned over and said with a smirk, "So, Rachel, this new job must be a big step up from your old one, huh?" She gave a little chuckle before adding, "Hopefully, they're paying you enough to upgrade that car soon." She nudged James, clearly finding her comment amusing. I was about to respond, but before I could say a word, my mom jumped in. "We're all so proud of Rachel. She's worked really hard for this," she said with a warm smile, her words filled with pride. The rest of the meal carried on with laughter and family stories, but I couldn't shake the tension that simmered just below the surface. Mary's comment, though said with a smile, had left a sting. She always seemed to know how to take a dig at me, and I could feel it gnawing at me throughout the evening. As the sun began to set, people started saying their goodbyes. I helped clean up, all the while thinking about Mary's arrogance and trying to shake off the uneasy feeling I had about starting my new job on Thursday. That Thursday morning, my nerves were in overdrive as I walked up to the sleek glass building of my new office. First days are always nerve-wracking, but this was on another level. I wasn't just starting a new job. I was stepping into a managerial role at one of the top marketing firms in the city. The pressure felt huge, and my stomach churned with a mix of excitement and anxiety. When I stepped inside, the receptionist greeted me with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Rachel. They're ready for you upstairs." I took a deep breath as I walked to the elevator, trying to steady my nerves. When the elevator doors opened, I was greeted by applause. My new team stood there, clapping, welcoming me with big smiles. It was a moment that felt surreal, and it eased some of the nerves that had been building up. The director, Mr. David, stepped forward and shook my hand firmly. "Everyone, let's officially welcome Rachel as your new project manager," he announced. The room buzzed with excitement, and I felt a rush of pride. But then, my eyes landed on Mary. She was clapping along with everyone else, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her applause was slow and hesitant, and I could see the shock on her face. It was clear she hadn't known until that moment that I would be her new boss. After the introductions, Mary approached me with a tight, forced smile. "Let's catch up after this, Rachel," she said, trying to sound cheerful, but there was an edge of surprise in her voice. "Sure, let's do that," I replied, keeping my voice calm and composed, though inside, my emotions were swirling. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction seeing Mary in this position after her comments at the barbecue. Once the meeting ended and people returned to their desks, Mary lingered. She walked toward me, her usual confidence clearly shaken. "Rachel, about the barbecue, I hope there are no hard feelings," she said, her voice much softer than usual. It was a far cry from the bold, smug Mary the First was used to. I looked at her, keeping my expression professional. "Mary, let's keep our focus on work. Personal matters stay outside these walls," I replied, giving her a polite but distant smile. "Of course, Rachel. You're right." Mary nodded, though her eyes darted away, unable to fully hide the unease she felt. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my new role. I spent hours reviewing project files and performance reports, trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible. One thing became clear: Mary's work required special attention. There were inconsistencies in her project timelines and budget allocations that didn't quite add up. I knew I had to address it sooner rather than later. During one of our one-on-one meetings, I decided to bring it up directly. "Mary, I've noticed some discrepancies in the Smith account. Can you walk me through your process here?" I asked, keeping my tone calm and professional. Mary hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard. "Sure," she replied, but I could see the unease in her eyes. It was going to be an interesting road ahead, managing both the professional challenges and the personal dynamics at play, but I was ready for it. This was my time to prove myself, and I wasn't about to let anything or anyone, including Mary, get in my way. Mary gave a nervous laugh, fidgeting with her pen. "I mean, it's probably just some small oversights. You know how it is with tight deadlines," she said, trying to brush off the issue. I looked at her calmly, but firmly. "Minor or not, accuracy is important, Mary. We can't afford any mistakes, especially with such important clients. Let's go through this together, okay?" My tone left little room for excuses, and Mary quickly nodded. "Yes, absolutely. I'll pull up the details now," she said, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed on her keyboard. As we went through the files, it became obvious that Mary had been cutting corners. Her work barely met the minimum standard, and the more we reviewed, the more gaps we found. I made sure to take notes on everything, documenting every oversight in detail. I knew this would come up again in future meetings, and I needed to be prepared for it. In our next meeting, I laid out the evidence in front of her. "Mary, based on these reviews, it's clear that there are consistent issues with your work. These oversights need to be fixed immediately." Mary's face tightened, but she nodded. "I understand, Rachel. I'll make sure to tighten things up." "Thanks for pointing these out," she said, her voice a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. I nodded, my tone firm. "Let's make sure it doesn't happen again." Our clients and our team are counting on us to be diligent. As Mary left my office, I could see the weight of the situation finally sinking in. For me, it was about making sure our work remained up to standard. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. In a way, it felt like justice was being served, and I knew Mary had a lot to prove going forward. The following Thursday, the stakes were even higher. Not just for me, but for Mary too. It was her chance to show what she could really do. She walked into the office, clutching her oversized designer bag and a stack of files. Her heels clicked on the polished floor as she made her way to my office. "Got a minute?" I called out, motioning her inside. My tone was serious, but calm. "Sure," she replied, smoothing down her blouse before sitting across from me. "I'm putting you in charge of the Henderson project," I said, laying out the project details in front of her. "It's not a huge project, but it's an important one. This is your chance to show what you're capable of." Mary's eyes widened slightly, a mix of nervousness and excitement flashing across her face. "Really? I mean, thank you, Rachel. I won't let you down." I nodded, watching her closely. "I'll be guiding you through it, but I want to see what you can do when you're leading the project." The next few days were intense. I kept a close eye on her progress, checking in regularly. We had frequent meetings, and I made sure to document every decision and approval. At first, Mary was enthusiastic, throwing herself into the project. But as the pressure mounted, her energy started to wane. During one of our strategy sessions, I noticed her struggling. "Mary, during our last review, you mentioned outsourcing some of the graphics work. Have you properly vetted the vendor?" I asked, trying to get a clear answer. "Oh, yeah, they're fine," Mary replied quickly, clearly trying to move past the question. "I mean, it should be okay." I raised an eyebrow, not satisfied with her response. "It's important that they're more than just okay. Can you show me the vetting process you used?" Mary paused, realizing she hadn't done the proper work. Her confidence faltered, and I could see that the stress was getting to her. This wasn't just about doing the minimum anymore, it was about stepping up and proving that she could handle the responsibility. As the project continued, I pushed her to meet the high standards we needed. It wasn't easy, but I could tell Mary was learning. Mistakes were still made, but each time, she corrected them faster. Watching her work under pressure, I realized that while she had a long way to go, she was starting to take the job more seriously. By the end of the project, I could see a change in Mary. She wasn't the same overconfident, carefree person from before. She had been humbled by the experience, and while there was still room for improvement, I knew she was on the right path. I pressed on, knowing that any mistake now would be officially noted. Mary fumbled through her files, her usual confidence slipping away. "I'll get that information to you by the end of the day," she stammered. "I just didn't bring the paperwork with me right now." The days stretched into weeks, and the project deadline loomed closer. In a team meeting, it was finally Mary's turn to present her progress. The room was full, and the air was thick with anticipation. Mary stood at the front, holding her report, but her usual poise was gone. She seemed unsettled, her confidence nowhere in sight. "All right, let's see," she began, flipping through her notes. "For the marketing strategy, we are, planning to," her words trailed off, and she stumbled over her sentences. The report lacked the depth and clarity that was expected, and I could sense the tension rising in the room. Mr. David, who was seated in the corner, raised his eyebrows slightly and gave me a nod, signaling his concern. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Mary," I interjected, "could you clarify how the budget was allocated? There seem to be some discrepancies between your report and the original estimates." Her face turned red as she shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I had to make some last-minute changes, and the costs, well, they kind of got away from me." "I see," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "It's crucial that we stick to the planned budget, especially when dealing with new clients. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again." I glanced around the room and could see the concern on my team members' faces. It was important for everyone to learn from this, not just Mary. As the meeting ended, the team shuffled out, and murmurs about the project's status filled the room. Mary lingered behind, her defeat evident. Her usual confidence had crumbled, and I could see the weight of the situation settling on her. "Rachel," she said quietly as she approached me. "I try to handle it, but I don't know what went wrong." I looked at her, my tone firm but not harsh. "Managing projects is about oversight and adaptability, Mary. We need to discuss how we can fix this." Mary nodded, agreeing to meet with me later to work through the issues. I could tell she was embarrassed, but this was more than just her failure. It was about maintaining a high standard for the entire team. I documented everything carefully, noting the issues in her work. It was clear to everyone now that her mismanagement had caused problems, but I wasn't happy about her struggle. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting the company and our clients. Upholding professional standards was key. The day after that rough meeting, the office was unusually quiet. As I made my way to my desk, I could hear whispers behind me. People were talking about what had happened. Mary was pacing near the water cooler and intercepted me before I could even sit down. "This was a setup, wasn't it?" she accused, her voice full of tension and confusion. "You've been out to get me from the start." I stood my ground and met her gaze. "I gave you an opportunity, Mary," I said evenly. "The outcome was in your hands, not mine." Mary looked frustrated, her anger barely contained. I understood that she was upset, but her accusation wasn't fair. She had been given every chance to succeed, and the decisions she made were her own. I wasn't here to sabotage her. I was here to make sure the job was done right. She paused for a moment, her face softening as the reality of the situation sank in. "I didn't mean for things to go this way," she muttered, her voice quieter now. "I know," I replied, "but this is about more than just one project. It's about learning from mistakes and improving. We can't afford to let this happen again." Mary nodded, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. She had to take responsibility for her actions, and I hoped this would be a turning point for her. This wasn't about tearing her down, it was about making sure she grew from the experience. We all had to be accountable, and I knew that if she took this lesson to heart, she could turn things around. I stayed calm and measured, even as Mary's tone grew more emotional. "But you just watched me fail," she said, her voice shaking with desperation. "You could have helped more. You could have guided me." "Helping is one thing," I replied, "but doing your job for you is another. We all have to meet the company's standards. Unfortunately, your work didn't meet those expectations." She scoffed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "So, that's it? You're just going to watch me go down?" "It's not about watching you fail, Mary. I document everyone's performance. It's my job, and it's not personal," I said, trying to stay firm yet professional. Later that afternoon, Mr. David called both of us into his office. The tension in the air was thick as Mary and I sat across from him. He laid out the papers I had prepared: mismanaged budgets, unvetted vendors, and timeline issues. "After reviewing the evidence and considering Rachel's observations, we've decided it's best for the company that we part ways with you, Mary," Mr. David said firmly. Mary's face went pale. The fire in her eyes faded as the reality of the decision settled in. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The news of Mary's termination spread quickly. At the next family gathering, the atmosphere felt a little strange. My brother James approached me while I was pouring myself some coffee. "I know it's been tough, Jules. Are you okay?" he asked, his concern clear. "I did what I had to do, James. It wasn't about revenge, it was about integrity," I said, feeling the weight of the situation. He nodded and gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "I know, sis. And I think deep down, everyone else knows it too." Our parents, ever supportive, didn't bring up Mary's absence. Instead, they focused on keeping the family together, making the night feel lighter as it went on. The laughter and conversation slowly helped ease the tension that had been there earlier. Later, as I drove home, the familiar hum of my old car gave me time to reflect. Watching the streetlights blur past, I thought about everything that had happened. My job demanded tough choices, ones that affected not just me but those around me. While I hadn't set out to hurt Mary personally, I knew my role was to uphold professional standards. That meant making difficult decisions, even when it involved family. Though the weight of those choices felt heavy, I drove on, confident that I had done my job with fairness and integrity. The road ahead felt clearer, guided by the principles I believed in most. And that wraps up our story. What do you think? Was Rachel right in how she handled the situation with Mary? Should she have been more supportive, or did she do the right thing by sticking to her professional duties? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.